is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Touched by Downing, swinging. There's a drive into left center field. That ball has got to be out of here. It's gone. It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time. And it's
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
He is fading, looking. He's under the gun. He's flat, he throws. It is.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is Mel Allen.
Touchdown! Oh, my!
The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier!
Hey, it's the Past Our Prime podcast. I'm joined as usual with my buddies Mark Hoffman and Bill Hoffman. Jeremy Ruby making sure everything gets...
I'm his brother now?
Oh, did I say brother?
Yeah, you said Bill Hoffman. Bill,
just
I didn't
keep
know
it
that.
All
going.
right. Billy Hoffman.
You're my brother.
My long-lost brother all these
It's like
years.
stepbrothers.
Okay, Scott Hoffman, Mark Hoffman.
Call me Mark Mahoney.
There you go.
Nice. I don't know who that guy is.
I just showed up.
Perfect. Well, I do know the podcast's name. It's called Past Our Prime.
you go.
And we're happy to be here talking about the January 28th, 1974 issue of Sports Illustrated. It's one of our cultural icons. It's a swimsuit issue, it goes back into the early 60s. I think 1964 was the first one. So this would be the 10th anniversary of that issue. And when you see the swimsuit issue, what you want to start the magazine off with is 6 pages of Marlboro ads, followed by the Aetna Health. So you see the gal on the cover, and then go start smoking.
Yes.
Well, here's the most
They were
amazing
smoking.
thing. The swimsuit issue doesn't even start till page 58.
No, it's toward
And
the end of the magazine.
It's only 7 pages long,
Yeah.
and then they do an article like on the photographer, and it's like later. I mean, the whole magazine today is the swimsuit
Right.
issue.
But
you know?
Mark, didn't the article on the photographer was like longer than the
yes,
article
exactly,
on the girls?
exactly. I'm
Yeah.
going, that's it.
It was. But they do start with a letter to the publisher, which is about something about like, if you've got the midwinter blues, then, go look at, girls in bikinis. And I tell you, I kid you not that I didn't enjoy the swimsuit issues as a younger person, but even as a kid, I didn't understand what the hell Sports Illustrated was doing, because 51 weeks out of the year, it's Muhammad Ali, it's Bill Walton, it's Pete Rose, it's Cheryl Teagues.
Yeah, but when I was a young kid, they just got in the swimsuit because I didn't care about girls at a certain point. They just got in the way.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, okay, yeah, let's get more sports things. Yeah.
Right?
No. I looked forward to that issue every year as a kid.
I'm sure you
You
did.
should have known.
Yeah, weirdo.
That's my brother for you.
What did Mom say about him? Mark, get out of the bathroom! I've got to go, Mom. On a serious note, and I am completely serious here. This issue had a woman by the name of Anne Simonton on the cover. She was 21 years old when the photo shoot took place, but 2 years earlier, this young woman was brutally attacked at knife point. I hate to segue like this but I think there's no delicate way of saying this. She was raped. She was 19 years old and in college. And not that this wouldn't hit home to anybody, but the three of us all have daughters. Mm-hmm. 2 of us are 19 years old and in college. And obviously it had an incredible impact on Anne's life. She ended up becoming pretty much a feminist and started some groups that were basically against this kind of an issue, swimsuit issue, that they objectified women, and agree or disagree with her on her position. She certainly tried to turn a horrific moment of her life and make a difference one way or the other. And for that, you have to tip your hat, because you can't even fathom what she had to live through. So we will get more, talk more about this later on, but for now, let's move on, and we'll stick with the somewhat a feminist issue here, because I'm showing my feminist side, and go to the scorecard portion. And there was a sports equity bill. Did you guys see this part where they were talking about a new education bill? Now, this is according to Sports Illustrated, that could emasculate sports, as it would require men's and women's coaches to be paid the same. The men's basketball coach gets paid $23,000. So does the women's basketball coach. Well, $23,000. Gino Aroma at UConn now makes $3.1 million a year. In fact, and here's where some equity comes along, thankfully. Dawn Staley recently signed a 7-year contract with South Carolina at $22.4 million. So at $3.2 million a year, she is the highest paid women's basketball coach. Half of all scholarships would have to go to women. Now, the argument then and now was always about football, because football is the program that brings in the money. It funds many of the other programs. It funds, women's softball to men's diving to whatever it is. So football is the big money maker. But I thought this was funny, because Oklahoma was on probation for football recruiting violations. And they said that with long-range obligations for capital improvements came to $4 million, with $611,000 of that going to the football field and a track and golf dormitory. But the business managers there said that despite 3-year losses of $181,000, they would have some room in the budget for the women's athletics in the second semester. $1,500.
Oh, man. Wow.
They're talking millions and millions,
Yeah.
and we're like, here's, we got some scraps for you, gals. So you can see where, well, I'm not going to go back and harp on what was happening then, but we have certainly come a long way in that regard. In fact, Mark, your wife played.
My wife actually got a college basketball scholarship. And athletics was a big part of her life growing up and stuff like that. And in fact, the basketball gym at her high school was built because of the success of the girls program and not the boys program. But I think women's athletics have come a long way. Now, there's no women's football, so you can't equate what the football coach gets, because there's not a comparable sport for women. But for instance, the USC-UCLA game that was recently played at Pauley was between the 2 of the top 10 teams in the country, and it was a sellout. And so,
which was unheard of even probably 10 years ago.
Right. So if you put out a product that people want to see, they will come to see it, no matter whether you're a man or you're a woman.
But that 1,500, that has to be a joke. I mean, I don't even think in the 70s 1,500 was thought, oh man, we can get a whole gymnasium for that. That's like the chancellor probably had that in his wallet. Right? Give him that. That's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, just the optics of that 50 years later, but that would have looked bad at the time.
You would think. But the guy kind of said almost with pride, hey, we've got some money, not for this semester. Next semester, we're going to do a car wash.
That's right. Do cookies.
And a bake sale. So anyway, that was in the scorecard section. Billy, you have something from there as well?
Yeah, I'm just a disheartened, beaten down Angels fan. So when I go back and I see the Angels drafted Dan Boone in 1974, or they drafted him in 73, didn't sign him. Drafted him in 74, didn't sign him. Drafted him again in 1976 and finally signed him. Oh yeah, love that guy. Took him 3 times to sign him. They released him 3 years later. And then he went to San Diego and had a pretty decent 2-3 years.
Nice.
I'm sorry, man. That's just from my Angel stuff. Every time I see that, I shake my head.
Did they was Davy Crockett not available?
They tried to get him. Yeah.
But it's so funny because they were talking about how Major League Baseball free agency isn't as big as the other sports. which is so
Yeah.
laughable now.
Now,
yeah.
yeah.
And they're talking like the Indians signing James Baby. 'Cause they thought
Finally.
that was a
Yeah.
Right, right. I always love in this section. They always have usually 5 or 6 quotes, and one of them is usually pretty funny. And I guess in the early '70s we were having. I mean, seems like we have been having it in this country for forever. An energy crisis, and Tad Potter, the majority stockholder of the Penguins, who were apparently a really bad NHL team back then, said, "I got the feeling the players think the energy crisis means they only give 85%. So, very good for Tad. Very good. The story of the week at this time, 50 years ago, was, and it was the story every week, because it was like, I can only imagine, because I was only 5, that every week people wanted to know, you'd go to bed late on the East Coast. Did UCLA win last night? Did UCLA win last night? And the answer 88 times in a row was yes. They lost in 1971 at Notre Dame, and that was the last loss before losing again after 88 straight wins again at Notre Dame. So UCLA basketball fans, if you hate Notre Dame, there's there's your reason for it. But just unbelievable.
And I'm the only one here that's old enough to have actually remembered watching that game. I was at my friend Mark Borson's house, and we watched them play Notre Dame, and they led most of the game. They were up, I think, by 17 early in the second half. They were up by 11 with 3.5 minutes to go, and then they didn't score again. Uncharacteristic turnovers, missed shots. Notre Dame comes back, grabs a 71-70 lead. They score the last 12 points. But UCLA gets the ball back. And I think they must have had 5 shots at the basket.
From
Walton,
close range.
Right.
Yeah.
Bill Walton missed a bank shot that he never did. There were a couple tip-ins that didn't go in. And they lost 71-70. And to me, it was a karma thing, because we talked about how the streak kind of started after they lost to Austin Carr and Notre Dame in '71. But 2 years later, UCLA broke the all-time winning streak that the University of San Francisco had held by winning at Notre Dame in '73. That was win number 61. And then a year later, the streak ends. So those 3 games, to me, there was a symmetry about them and a karma feeling of why perhaps the winning streak should end there at South Bend, Indiana.
I just take it that just that thought of a team winning 88 straight games. I get that they lost to Notre Dame and it was terrible at the time. 88 straight wins. That is mind blowing. If that happened nowadays in any sport, it would be plastered everywhere. And the thing that with UCLA doing that and with the amazing players they had, I mean, obviously you watched the game, I can't get over that number because it doesn't seem real.
Well, you hate to say that certain things, that record will never be broken, but with the way that the college rules are, where basically you have a new team every year, especially if you're a great team, you could have a team go undefeated. That wouldn't surprise me. But if you have a team that's that good, those players aren't coming back the next year.
Right. But back then, they would play mostly all 4 years.
Right. So how are you going to get basically 3 seasons in a row of great undefeated talent? It doesn't. I just don't see that record being broken.
And the one thing, too, about the Notre Dame game that people forget, 1 week after that streak ended and they lost to Notre Dame, they hosted them at Pauley 7 days later, and they beat them by 19 points in that game,
and blew them out early.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought this was interesting, though, and to his credit, Digger Phelps, the coach at Notre Dame, it was his 3rd season. He had his team practice cutting down the nets prior to the game. He wanted to get into their head that this was a possibility, because I think of it kind of like Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, the best chance someone had against Mike Tyson losing when he was in his prime was that he didn't show up. Once he got into the ring, it was over. And that was the case a lot of times when UCLA came onto the court. They looked at these guys. They knew they were overmatched. The game was over. And Digger Phelps wanted them to go, no, it's not over. We can play with these guys.
That's that jersey. When UCLA, that jersey just intimidated kids when they went on the court.
Absolutely.
Well, the whole UCLA dynasty, that was interesting. It started with Walt Hazzard and Gail Goodrich. They won back-to-back titles. Then the no freshman rule, so Lou Alcindor could not play that first year. They didn't win. And then they started the streak where they won 3 more with Lou. And then when he went to the NBA, everyone said, okay, now UCLA's going to get their up-and-comings. Alcindor's gone. They're going to start losing games. There's going to be a new championship team. But the Sidney Wicks, Curtis Rowe teams kept winning. And I mean, UCLA won 7 titles in a row, 10 in 12 years. It was just
It will
amazing.
never be replicated.
No, it
I
can't.
mean, 60-0. I mean, there were the UCLA records are just they're mind-boggling because there's certain things, you know, you look back of records of, like, you think of baseball, Cy Young throwing whatever 500 wins or something like that, but you just, when I think of things like UCLA and these records are just, my mouth's
Well,
agape.
there was one common thing
Yeah.
through all of that, and that was Coach Wooden,
Right.
who
Yeah.
is universally beloved and respected. And the thing that I think is so telling about him is how much his players loved that man. And the other coach on the other side, Digger Phelps, like I said, it was his 3rd season. He takes over for Notre Dame. He goes 6-20 his first season, 18-12 the next season. This year they were ready. They finished 26-3. It was his best season in the 20 years he had at Notre Dame. He never won a national championship then, but Notre Dame was always a tough win, not just for UCLA, but anyone during Digger Phelps's tenure. One of the better coaches of the 70s and 80s, and then went on to become a broadcaster for years and years. So a great moment for Notre Dame. The streak's going to have to come to an end at some point. In some ways, you don't want it to come, no offense, but in Pullman, or, you know what I mean? Like, to have it end at Notre Dame 3 years after having it ended at Notre Dame, somewhat poetic.
Nationally televised
That's
game,
right.
the whole
That's
thing.
right.
Yeah.
The funny story is that when they lost to Notre Dame in 71 to Austin Carr, I had this feeling they were going to lose the game. And as a UCLA fan, I couldn't bear to think about that. So I refused to watch the game. So I just stayed in my room. And my dad would keep knocking on the door and go, hey, Notre Dame's up by 5 right now with 4 minutes to go in the game. And I go, Dad, don't tell me any of this. I don't want to hear this. And he kept coming in, telling me, oh, they're down like by 3 now. And I'm like, Dad. And then finally he goes, they lost. I said, thanks a lot.
That's just the way Dad was, though.
Yeah.
All right.
If I had the chance, I'd probably do the same thing.
Yeah, Mark, how did you become such a big UCLA fan? I mean, you were in Chicago. and-
It's so weird. I don't know if I should tell it, but I moved from Chicago to LA. I'm over at my cousin's house. My uncle runs up to me and goes, UCLA's playing USC. They're playing USC. It's a big game. It was the football game of the century, number 1 against number 2, O.J. Simpson, Gary Beeman. And I go, I don't know. Who are they? And they go, well, it's the USC Trojans. And growing up in Chicago, my aunt was from Detroit, brainwashed me. I was a Tigers fan. I go, Trojans, Tigers, kind of sounds the same. All right, I'll root for the Trojans. And then I asked, what colors do they wear? I go, well, the Trojans are red and yellow and the Bruins are blue and gold. Oh, red and yellow, that sucks. No, I'm a UCLA fan. To this day, had the UC system adopted red and gold and not blue and gold, I might be a Trojan fan. Really weird, but lived and died UCLA sports ever since.
Wow. Yeah. A lot of dying lately.
Yeah, let's not get into that. Not women's basketball.
A lot of dying.
Yeah.
Not women's
A lot of
basketball.
dying.
Baseball
Brings it.
program, good.
Nice.
Soccer, gymnastics.
70-69. UCLA's 88-game winning streak in immediate jeopardy now.
You know, Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as we now know him, was 88-2 in college. Only one player in NCAA history has a better record, 89-1.
Who could that be?
I
That
don't know who
player,
that
of
is.
course, was also a UCLA Bruin, and it was Larry Farmer. And Farmer has a book out that was published in February of 2023 by Santa Monica Press called Role of a Lifetime, Larry Farmer and the UCLA Bruins. And look at this. Larry is joining us now. Larry, thank you. Thank you for
knew?
coming on the Past Our Prime podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm excited about it.
Well, I'm going to take you down a level just a little bit, Larry, because we're going to be that proverbial parent that has a kid that goes all through high school and gets nothing but straight A's. And then we're going to talk about the B- that they got, because we were just talking about January 1974 at Notre Dame. Does that one still sting for you guys?
It absolutely does. I was a sophomore at UCLA on the same team with Sidney Wicks, Curtis Rose, Steve Patterson, and we'd gone to South Bend. We had won, I believe it was 12 games in a row that season, and we got beat in South Bend by Austin Carr, who scored 46 points, and that's where the 88 game win streak started. So not only did it end in 1974 on that date that you just mentioned that will live in infamy, but it also started there. So I kind of bookended it. I was a graduate assistant on Coach Wooden's staff when the streak ended, but I was a sophomore when it began, and they both hurt.
What do you remember most about that game in '74?
I watched the game on television from Los Angeles like everybody else. And, I had been at practice every day as an assistant, graduate assistant coach. And so all of the events leading up to that game, I thought it would just be another routine event. We go back to Notre Dame. The game was going to be on national television. It would be a tough game. It usually was back there. But we would go back there, handle our business, and then after that game, you would either resume or start open conference. And I just remember as I watched the game, it went purely as I thought it would. We controlled the tempo. We controlled the game. Late in the game, we had a lead. And I, like everybody else, did not expect a complete collapse.
34, 33, 32, 31. That's Clay. Good score. The first time the Irish have led in the game.
Where we went, was the last 3.5, 4 minutes without scoring a basket. And I'd never seen that. I'd never seen that at UCLA, much less I'd never seen it that year with that team. And when the game ended, when the horned sound and all of the Notre Dame fans rushed the court, I remember sitting there watching the game on television, and I was in shock.
Notre Dame 71, UCLA 70 with 6 seconds left. Into Walton. He can't score. Cernovich fires. Shoemake. It's all over. The number 1 ranked UCLA Bruins have been upset by the Irish of Notre Dame. 71-70. The longest winning streak in collegiate sports history has ended where it began 3 years ago. Unbelievable.
I mean, I was literally in shock. I didn't believe that I'd seen what I had just seen, that the streak was over and we had gotten beat in South Bend.
You were part of 75 of those 88 wins in a row. How much pride did you take in the fact that the longevity of a streak like that?
Well, you think that it will eventually come to an end. I didn't know when. And so because I was there when it started and, I was on the team that broke USF's 60-game win streak, the Bill Russell, Casey Jones, USF college team that had won 60 in a row. I had a lot invested in that, as did everybody that played during that era. And again, you knew it would happen eventually, but I had no suspicion that it would happen in South Bend. We were playing well during that game. We were playing like we had played in all the games leading up to that game. We were undefeated going there. And it was typical UCLA basketball. But I was in shock. I was literally in shock. And I felt like a piece of me had been destroyed. I think most of us did. It's like, how did this happen? It was just one game.
You played 3 seasons under Wooden, I'm assuming, because as a freshman, you couldn't play with the varsity team. And as a sophomore, you guys really struggled because you went 29-1, winning a national title. The next 2 seasons, you go 60-0 and win 2 more titles. You never lost a conference game. That's just amazing. How were you guys able to not take winning for granted?
You have to credit Coach Wooden with all of that. It's become a sports cliche where you say we play one game at a time, or we don't look past anybody. Well, that was our culture Coach Wooden, during the course of a week of practice, Coach Wooden would never mention our opponent's name. He would always talk about how much more important it was to be concerned about what we were going to do and not the opponent. So the emphasis on our preparation every week was on UCLA and not our opponent. Guys, there were literally times where I didn't know who our next opponent was going to be because I didn't read the newspaper. And Coach Wooden would never bring up the other team during the course of practice. Now, you'd always know play SC or Notre Dame or, any of the games that were going to be on national television because of all of the hype that would go on before. But during the course of the average week, again, all of our focus was placed on us. And we had what you would call a competitive atmosphere in practice, not a comparison. So we were never talking about how we were going to match up against anybody else. For 2 straight years, we were ranked the number 1 team in the country. And when we would come in after a weekend of success, having, beaten the 2 opponents the week before, Monday would come in and it would be business as usual. We would get right back to the fundamentals, our conditioning and teamwork. And it would be as if nothing had happened, nothing had transpired the week before. And so Coach Wooden really kept us grounded in the belief that, we determined our own fate. He never used the word winning. He never talked about win streaks. And it was really through him that I think it kept us not only motivated, but it kind of kept us in check. So we never thought we were better than we really were.
Larry, this is Bill Mahoney. I reading your book, fantastic. I couldn't put it down.
Thank you.
The one thing that I took from it was your relationship with John Wooden. I mean, it superseded basketball. Tell me about that.
When you play for Coach, it was a typical player-coach relationship. I respected him. I obviously liked him a lot more when I got to shoot the ball a few more times. It's funny how that
Right.
works. And when you play with guys like Henry Bibby or Bill Walton or Jamal Wilkes, there are opportunities for them to shoot it a few more times than you do. But I had that typical player-coach's relationship with them. Respect. I'd get angry if I thought that, I wasn't getting to play my game the way I wanted to play it. But I always trusted him. And I knew that if I did exactly what he told me to do on the court, that my minutes would, I would have an opportunity to play and my minutes would be what I expected. And so, we had a very good player-coaches relationship. My senior year, when he made me the captain of the team, it led me to believe that, he saw my value beyond what I was doing, on the court, because I knew that he held anybody that he would place in the position of being the team captain. That was a role that Coach Wooden really didn't hand out easily. And he had to have a lot of respect for you to give you that title. So that changed our relationship. In my mind, it changed our relationship because I thought then that he respected me a lot more as a person. Now, see, he already had respected me. I just wasn't aware of it until he named me captain. And then like any relationship, once I graduated from UCLA and started coaching, it was amazing how much smarter Coach Wooden became to me when all of those little things that he would say to us during practice started to become important. It became really important when I started my family. Those life lessons that he was saying, those little sayings that he had, it's amazing how much can be accomplished when no one's concerned over who gets the credit. Things turn out best for the people that make the best out of the way things turn out. He would say those things, in practice, and you'd hear him go in one ear and out the other. Then all of a sudden you start coaching or you start a family and you start relying on some of those things. Hey, that was pretty smart of Coach. And so as I grew up, as I got older, my relationship with him changed. And it went from being a player coach to actually being really good friends, where I could confide in Coach. I could talk to him. I could talk to him about anything. And I could have always done that when I played for him. I never took advantage of that because, again, there was that respect. There was probably a little bit of fear, and there was always that gap, I guess, that you have to have a successful player-coach relationship. Well, once I became an adult and assistant coach, all of that got thrown out the window, and I wound up having a great relationship with Coach Wooden.
The one thing I was going to say is the one thread in the book that I noticed between your father, Coach Wooden, and even Sam Gilbert, there was a common thread, and that was hard work. Hard work was the key to success in whatever you did.
Absolutely. In Coach Wooden's pyramid of success, the two cornerstones, one is enthusiasm and the other is industriousness. Enjoy what you do and then work hard and work smartly. And the three people that you just mentioned were always those three people that preached that to me. I coached basketball for 44 years before I retired. And, I look back and it was like I never worked a day in my life because I really enjoyed what I was doing. But working hard, understanding what it takes to get better each and every day. And, this again goes back to the question, how did Coach Wooden keep teams that weren't losing, but were winning all the time, keep us grounded? His approach of working hard every day and just getting a little bit better every day, the focus being on the team and not the individual, all of those things were life lessons for me. And so being surrounded by people that were of influence in my life that preached hard work, enjoying what you do, but work smartly, that really impacted my life. And I tried to pass those messages along throughout my coaching career.
Hey, Larry, the 60s and 70s were a very tumultuous time in our country for race relations in particular. Mm-hmm. How was Coach Wooden able to connect? He seems like this professorial, kind of meek, quiet man, and yet he's able to connect with young men, young black men specifically. How is he able to do that?
I think because of his understanding of human nature and people. Coach Wooden had the respect of all of the players on the team because he practiced what he preached. And that gave you, to a degree, an instant respect for him. Little things like, if he said, be prepared and be ready to work hard. Well, he came into practice every day with that 3x5 card, and he had spent a couple of hours every day preparing that practice. He was always early. So he kind of set the example. In our first team meeting, Coach Wooden would always talk about the focus during the season being on the team, but he never took away our ability to be individuals. As you mentioned, that time in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, you had the civil rights movement, you had Vietnam. There were all kinds of social things that were going on in America. America was changing. And Coach Wooden was smart enough to understand those changes. He was in the midst of that because his players were in the midst of it. But he asked us to focus during the season on the reason that we were at UCLA, which was to get an education and to play basketball. And then in the off season, where our views politically wouldn't reflect directly on the basketball program, we were free to be who we wanted to be or who we needed to be. And I think it was because of his ability to allow us to be ourselves, to understand what was going on, socially, culturally in America. And really and truly, we didn't know whether he agreed with our stand or not, but his ability to tell us that he understood and he would allow us the freedom, because he recruited a bunch of really bright guys to pursue whatever we believed in. I think that was the marriage that he juggled, during that period of time. A lot of people don't remember that the Olympics that were held in Mexico City, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then Lou Alcindor, boycotted those Olympics. So you had the best player in the world not competing in the 66 Olympics. Well, or 68 Olympics. Well, why didn't he do it? Well, he didn't feel that he should. And when he expressed his feelings to Coach Wooden agreed with him. And so Kareem didn't go. So he was that kind of a person. He was that kind of coach. it's legendary about, Bill Walton and some of the trouble that Bill got into, but he had the freedom to be himself. And I think that's one of the unique things about Coach Wooden and how he dealt with his players during that very tumultuous time.
I graduated UCLA, and when I think about UCLA, I think of Jackie Robinson, Rayford Johnson, Arthur Ashe, Kareem, Woody Strode. And yet it wasn't until 1981 when you were named the head coach. That was the first time that an African American coached any sports team at UCLA. What did that mean to you?
At the time, it was a little bit, it was overwhelming for a number of reasons, to say the least.
Well, you were 30.
30. Yeah.
Taking the trash out is overwhelming at 30.
When I really let that sink in, and it wasn't until many, many years later, I was 12 years removed from my recruiting visit to UCLA. Mm-hmm. The office that I went into when I sat down on the Sunday, my final Sunday on my recruiting visit to UCLA, when I sat in Coach Wooden's office and visited with him about why I should come to UCLA, 12 years later, that was my office. That still blows my mind. It really does. But, I knew I had a responsibility, and the responsibility was, one, Coach Wooden was very instrumental in, of course, me getting that position. And I knew that in getting the head coaching job at UCLA, it went with a lot of responsibilities, not to mention the fact that I had been a player and gone 89-1 and played during, arguably the most successful period of time in the history of college basketball. So I knew that there was that expectation. Then there was the way that, Coach Wooden had us conduct ourselves off the court, how we represented the university, our families. Then you combine that with the fact that I was 30 years old and I was an African-American. African-Americans to that point in Division I college basketball, when you look back, you had Fred Snowden at Arizona, you had George Raveling at Washington, you had John Thompson at Georgetown, you had John Chaney at Temple. And so there were a handful of black coaches that had become head coaches, but those guys were all given programs that needed to be built, that were struggling. And, lo and behold, because of the success that they had, all of a sudden, I was hired at UCLA, a program that definitely wasn't struggling, nor had it been struggling. Mm-hmm. And so that was quite unique. Again, when I look back at it, UCLA was very progressive in how they dealt with social norms and how they changed many things. Out of all the great people you mentioned, we have a building named on campus after Dr. Ralph Bunche, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. And so I did take that very seriously. And I knew that based on how I handled myself on and off the court, that I could also be a stepping stone, just like those four coaches that I named. Because of the jobs that they had done, it allowed me to have the opportunity at UCLA. I knew that I had a big enough spotlight on me that if I could be successful, I could open doors for other people of color.
Larry, Bill Walton wrote the foreword to your book. Once again, Role of a Lifetime: Larry Farmer and the UCLA Bruins. We know Bill is kind of a zany guy, this persona that he has. We also know what a great college and NBA player he was. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with the big redhead.
Yeah, Bill, I love Bill, needless to say. When we were teammates, you had no idea. Well, the first time I ever played with him, I had no idea what to expect. He was almost 7 foot tall. He was kind of gangly. And, after one or two practices, you realize that this guy was special. He was quick. He was agile. He could jump. He could block shots. He could score the ball. And, it was almost intoxicating to watch the way he played, because even in practice, there was a love for the game. There was an eagerness. There was an excitement. There was an enthusiasm. And as much as you thought you were bringing that to practice, again, I was 1 year older. So when Bill was a sophomore, his first year on the varsity, I was a junior. And for a young guy coming into varsity for the first time, there was a veteran quality to him. And that youthful enthusiasm that he brought really kind of perked up things. So from a player standpoint, you're immediately impressed by his ability. As we became friends and got to know each other, Bill's a smart guy. He's a fun-loving guy. And then they're the best teammate in the world. When you watch him on TV these days, I laugh because I realize, that's Bill and that's his stick. And people, you either love or hate him. I happen to love him. But you talk about a quality person who would give you the shirt off his back. I've never asked Bill for anything that Bill hadn't given me. When I played with Bill, there was, and Jamal to that matter, or any of the guys at UCLA, I wanted to make sure that I did my job and I never let those guys down. And I had that kind of respect for him particularly. But, our friendship grew as we became teammates in our careers at UCLA. Went through those 2 years. We never lost a game as teammates. And then we became much better friends after I graduated and Bill graduated, and we went on to, pursue our lives. And the times we would get back together, usually something involving UCLA, it was amazing, the bond, the friendship, the brotherhood that we all had, but me and Bill, at least for me specifically. And so I love the redhead. He's bright. He's charming. He's funny, and we get to see all those things. And as I said, you talk about a great teammate. He was great in the locker room. He was great at his part. When he throw a party for you, I just love him.
But when you talk about that, you say about the Bill Walton being zany and fun. What was he like, though, when he turned it on the court?
Well, I mentioned this in the book. We had only played, I think it was 3 or 4 games together. This is my junior year. This was the season that we went 30-0, and our average win margin, which is still a record to date, was 30.3 points per game. You let that sink in. We beat everybody we played by a margin of 30.3 points per game. And we're about 3 games into this season, 3 or 4 games. We're warming up, and Bill comes over to me and Jamal during warmups, kind of pulls us aside, and he says, "Look, guys, we got a great fast break, but you guys are getting in my way when I go after the defensive rebound. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to block out your guys. I'll get the rebound. And when I get the rebound, then I want you guys to just sprint the lanes, and then you guys can score at the other end." So I'm looking at Jamal. Jamal's looking at me. And it's like, well, it's fine with me, but, nobody's cleared this with Coach Wooden. And so, lo and behold, I forget who we were playing, but the ball goes up and I block out my man. Jamal hits his, and here goes Bill. And Bill's an exceptional rebounder. He would get 2 hands on the ball, and while he was still in the air, he would be tucking the ball, getting it in a position of strength, and he would turn his head. So before he would land on the floor, he would already know where he was going to throw that outlet pass. And then that ball would be out of his hands. And we had a step or 2 steps of an advantage on our fast break before the offense, now going to defense, could react, our opponent. And so on this one particular play, when the ball hit the rim and went up, Jamal and I took off because we thought Bill was going to get the rebound. He didn't. And so all of a sudden, we're at half court. The guards have gotten wide for the outlet pass, and it's Bill in there 1 against 5. And so, needless to say, Coach Wood was not pleased with us and told us not to leak. The reason I tell you that story is, Bill was kind of a coach on the floor. And because of his basketball intellect, he would see things like that. He thought more like a point guard than he did a center. He was more of an action guy than a reaction guy. And you expect more of a reaction out of your center. And so because of his intellect, there were always things that he did that made my job easier. I'll tell you one more quick story. Coach Wooden would often put me on the best perimeter player on the other team. For example, I guarded Ed Ratliff, Ernie Di Gregorio, Phil Smith. A lot of my matchups were against smaller guys. I was fairly quick and pretty disciplined defensively, but I always knew I could gamble a little bit because if I got beat and the guy that I was guarding drove to the basket, well, I would go through the motions of staying in the play and chasing him down. But if I funneled you to Bill, you were going to get your shot blocked for change. He was going to get the ball. He was going to start the fast break, and I was going to be the hero because my guy didn't score on me. So he made my job defensively and everybody's job defensively very, very easy.
How did you get to UCLA? Because you grew up in Denver, and you weren't initially in high school this superstar player at all. Talk about that journey to get to Westwood.
You talk about divine intervention. I watched UCLA play Houston in a game that's been referred to as the game of the century. Okay. I'm a junior in high school. I'm not yet even a starter on my junior varsity team. And the head coach at my high school in Colorado, Al Oviatt, had told us that there was going to be this big-time college basketball game that was going to come on. He encouraged all the guys on the team to watch it so we could see how basketball was supposed to be played. Now, I knew who Lou Alcindor was, and, you know, in reading the articles in all the basketball magazines that had come out, I knew about Coach Wooden, but I'd never seen him play. And so sitting in the den in cold Colorado, I watched UCLA play Houston. Elvin Hayes goes off in the game, and Houston actually winds up beating UCLA. They were ranked the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country. First time there had been a college basketball game come on in prime time that wasn't an NCAA tournament game. And there was something about those 4 letters. There was something about watching Lou Alcindor and Mike Warren and Lucius Allen. There was something about that team that just struck me. And when UCLA lost that game, it was almost like I was a member of the team and I'd lost. And my mom and dad, who were sitting in the den with me, because I talked them into watching the game with me, when the game ended, I turned to them and I said, I'm going to play at UCLA. Of course, there was silence. You know, my parents didn't want to say, are you crazy? Are you out of your mind? Did you just see this? And but they didn't. And my father finally broke the silence. He said, you know, if you ever want to be that good, you're going to have to work really hard. Well, that became my goal. And it's a really long story. You got to read the book as to all of the little things that happened. But through my academic advisor and writing letters, writing a letter to UCLA, but writing letters to about 25 different schools and sending out tape and timing. UCLA recruited me late in the during my senior year. Denny Crum called me and said, hey, we saw your tape, we see your transcript. You think you're good enough to play at UCLA? And of course I said, yes, I think I'm good enough. And I had no idea if I was ever going to be good enough to play at UCLA. But through divine intervention, I wound up getting recruited late in my senior year and then signing to play basketball for Coach Wooden.
And indeed you were.
I got to ask this, Larry. Years later, you got to coach under Larry Brown.
Yes.
And he used a statement. I think, what was it? He needed you to, let me look here for a second. I got to read it. We've got to use the power. Can you explain what that meant?
That was, that was really, that was funny. We're playing DePaul, and they had Mark Aguirre. They had a great team, and you know, Coach Brown, Hall of Fame coach, great basketball mind, one of the greatest coaches and people that I had the privilege of working for, and this was a first for me. You know, I come out of a completely different school of coaching. And, you know, Coach Brown, he was, you know, flashy, and he had the NBA and ABA resume. Anyway, we needed a stop. We needed to get a defensive stop. We're at that point in the game. It was late where, you know, we could win this thing if we could just have a possession where we didn't allow DePaul to score. He got the great Ray Meyer coaching. And out of the clear blue sky, DePaul's getting ready to inbound the ball, and Coach Brown tells Kelvin O'Connor and I, we're the 2 assistants, we got to use the power, this mystical energy that's going to help our team get this stop. Now, you know, Coach Wooden was very superstitious. So, being around somebody that might be a little superstitious was not anything new to me, but this was new to me. And so, without being too graphic, he said that, we needed to hold on to a private part of our body, a testicle, and to squeeze it. And if we did that, we would invoke the power. Now, I don't know exactly what this power was, but we would invoke a power that would then allow us to play great defense on that possession and get a stop. So you got to imagine I'm sitting here, what? Power? What is that? So they're both Kevin and because apparently Kevin was onto this and he kind of knew what that was. We never used it all year. And this is in the postseason. So we're sitting there and they tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. Now, Coach Brown is still up now because the game's going on. DePaul's advancing the ball up the court. So all of this is happening very rapidly. So I lean over and I'm doing what they're trying, squeezing the test. I'm doing what Coach Brown asked me to do. Well, we're there. We're playing pretty good defense. Hey, this might work after all. Paul gets up a shot and they miss, and they get the offensive rebound. Now, there's no shot clock in those days. So, this possession could last 30 seconds. It could last 3 minutes. And they get the offensive rebound and they reset. Here I am, and I'm sitting there still in this position. We're still invoking the power. And so they reset. Coach Brown is still standing up. He looks over at me and Kevin. He goes, sorry, guys, but he didn't tell us to stop using it. And, it's funny now. They shot the ball and missed, and we did get the defensive rebound, so it did work.
Yes. Yes. You have to just save it for the right moment, though.
We never used it again, but it worked the time that we did use it.
And you never invoked it at any of your other college stops, just for you to see the other coaches look on their face?
You know what? I'm coaching high school basketball now. I might think about doing that.
Very good.
Hey, Coach, we do a little segment here called 50-50. It's a trivia thing. I give you a 50% chance of getting this trivia question right from 50 years ago. Now, this is sort of an honor of you dabble a little bit in TV and film, Fast Break, White Shadow. You did a little dabbling in that area. So this trivia question relates to that. There was a television show on 50 years ago called Mannix. I don't know if you remember it. Mike Connors was a private detective. True or false? The lead, Mike Connors, played basketball at UCLA.
True.
You are correct. Very good. Okay, I got a bonus one
Hold
for
on,
you.
You didn't pause at all.
Yeah,
so
he knew.
You had to have known that. Have you met? Did you ever meet Mike Connors?
I did, and that's why I knew it. That's why it was easy for me to answer that question so quickly. My mom and dad actually came out to visit me at UCLA when I was one of the 3 years that I was the head coach. And through an alumni who knew Mike Connors, my parents were big Mannix fans. And so I was actually able to drive them to the set. And so they could watch one of the tapings. And so then they got to meet the stars of the show,
Nice.
Chuck Connors. And then I forget the gal's name that played his
Gail Fisher. Fisher.
Yep. And Mom and they were so excited. And he mentioned that to me at the time that he had played basketball at UCLA. So, yeah, I did know that.
Okay, so here's a bonus one. Just see if you get this one. There was an episode of Mannix that was shot maybe a few years earlier. And there were two former Bruin legend basketball players that made cameos on that episode. Any idea who those two players were?
Now, that I don't know. But I would guess that one of them could have been Mike Warren, only because, he became a terrific actor. Mm-hmm. And the only other person that I would just guess, I would guess, might be Lou Alcindor.
You are right on one of them. Lou Alcindor was one of the guests on the show. Mike Warren was a really good guest, but it wasn't Mike. Gail Goodrich was the other one.
Oh, wow.
Yes. It was an episode 1971, if you look it up on IMDb. But yeah, that's my trivia for the day.
Awesome.
Nice.
Mark. Wow.
And for getting it right, Larry, we will let you go.
That's hey,
That is the only gifts we have. A parting gift is saying
Thank
goodbye.
you.
But I can't thank you enough for your time today. It was so fun. This trip down memory lane. I'm glad we got the loss to Notre Dame out of the way early, and then talked about nothing but good times at UCLA. Thank you very much, and good luck with the book. The book, once again, is Role of a Lifetime: Larry Farmer and the Bruins. Thank you, Larry.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Thank
It was
you,
a lot
Larry.
of fun.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh man, that was a side of Larry Farmer that, I was 13 years old when he was named head coach, and I mean, I didn't think of him as being a 30-year-old. He was just an older guy, and he played it so kind of close to the vest. He was so respectful and stuff. But he's a fun-loving, good dude.
He said he was retired. I'd run through a wall for that guy right now. Could you
Right?
have met?
I thought he was coaching his kid's high school team, maybe.
Yeah, I think he said that, but
Yeah.
he said, when I retired 40 whatever years ago, I just
Right.
kept thinking, he's like Pete Carroll of basketball.
Yeah.
Man, he makes me want to get up and go, okay, let's get going. He was great.
I think he was the kind of player that really emphasized what John Wooden was about, in that you sacrifice some of your personal stats to be a key member, a glue guy on the team, which is what he was.
Yeah, you're right. A glue guy, which sometimes has the connotation of being. I mean, and his book is called Role of a Lifetime. So he was a role player, but he averaged like 12 points a game his senior year. I mean, he was a legit contributor. I think the third leading scorer behind Bill and Jamal. So, a legit third option. Like you said, defended their top offensive player often, and just a breath of fresh air.
But he played exactly the way Wooden wanted him to, and what he asked him to do. If he didn't want to play that way, he wouldn't be at UCLA. So I think, I don't know. I think you were right, Scott. They use terms like glue guy as a negative. You need those guys, and Larry Farmer was obviously vital to UCLA's success.
And a glue guy doesn't mean you're bad. A glue guy means you're a talented player,
Yeah.
but you're more than just that. You're mentally tough, and you're someone that can really be a calming influence on the rest of your teammates.
Well, it's in that sort of with football game manager. They use these things as a
Right.
negative. It's not. It's you need those guys. Not everyone can score 30 points a game.
Right.
Hey, I got one number, 89-1.
Thank you.
Moving on, let's go to the links, and we're going to talk a little golf here. Johnny Miller, what a start he had to the PGA season. He won the first 3 tournaments of the year. In fact, if you go back to the World Cup in Spain, which was the last thing he played in '73, it was his 4th straight win. Of him playing, 3 of them being the first, and he was the first person on the PGA Tour history to win the first 3 events of a season, and everyone by all accounts thought that this guy was going to be the next Jack Nicklaus. He wasn't. That's no knock on him. There was no other Jack Nicklaus. That's why he is Jack Nicklaus. But a great career. I think he was PGA Player of the Year that year. He topped the money list, winning 8 times and collecting $353,000, which back then was a lot of money.
But you look at, when you think of Johnny Miller and you see the start that he had, you're right, there were high expectations. But he never won a major championship after the Open Championship in 1976. He finished second at the Masters in 1981. But they said between 76 and 79, he developed the yips. So he really never had that opportunity to be that star and the Nicklaus protege or follow Nicklaus's footsteps.
I think the hardest thing to do in any sport you do is continued success. It is so difficult just to be successful for a small period of time, and to extend that to
repeat that.
It's just the hardest possible thing to do, not just physically but mentally.
I thought this was interesting, coming off the heels of talking about John Wooden, is that Miller wasn't. He didn't practice.
Yeah.
He basically didn't want. He thought his swing was basically as good as it was going to get. And he thought playing, rounds of golf that actually mattered was enough. But what he did do was he wrote himself notes, which is very Wooden-esque like. He wrote things down like, accelerate the whole club, get the blade on the ball, picture the swing, setup is everything, take it back. So these mind games that he would carry along with him on little note cards. And in fact, he would tell his caddy, when he would think of something, to make a note of it. And in this, he told the guy, write down, don't rush it. So he had these little mind games that he would try to, because at the time, he didn't need to practice. He was winning pretty frequently.
And I love the picture in the article, because you were talking about his caddy, Andy Martinez, and that is some great hair. That says 1974 to me, with the
no doubt.
Yeah, the hair and the mustache. And the stash.
He had the big stash. Yeah.
Sports Illustrated back then was basically infatuated with track and field. They loved track and field, and I can only assume, therefore, that there was an audience for it. But you can't go more than maybe 2 or 3 issues without something on a track and field star, and more often than not, someone I have never heard of, and that includes this next guy, Marcello Fiasconaro. I just butchered him. I'm sure I just butchered his. I should have just called him Marcello Hoffman. That's so much easier.
More Mahoney.
Your oldest brother.
The oldest brother.
But he was a weird dude. He was Italian, but he was in South Africa because his dad, I forget what it was, his dad was an Italian opera singer in the Italian Air Force and was shot down in North Africa during World War II, ended up in a POW camp in South Africa. That's where he met his wife, married her, had his kid. The kid was Marcello, who was a runner, but he was a weird guy. Bill, tell us how he would make entrances to when he would get out of a car.
Well, I just pull these things, weird things. So when they'd, when you go up, someone pulls over and you get out of the car. No, he didn't wait for the car to stop. He just dove out of the car. But man, when you stop running,
would dive head first. Yes. Roll over and then leap to his feet. I'm here. This guy's trying to make Olympic teams and stuff. What could go wrong jumping out of a moving car? I have no idea.
What I loved about this is he never turned the TV set off day or night, because you never know when there'd be a good Western on.
Because he loved Clint Eastwood. That was his guy. Yeah.
So that'd be great, man.
Right.
See, today he'd just be on his phone all the time.
The thing that he said, though, that I found interesting, and this once again goes back to 50 years, is he didn't want to turn the TV off because back then it took a while for a TV to turn on.
Yeah, it had that little...
Right? And so, I can remember certain times, like you're watching a game and you're like waiting, and it would, it was only probably... a handful of seconds, 5-10 seconds. But yeah, TV didn't turn on right away. It kind of glow a little bit.
There was a dot, and then it went big.
And then it would pop on.
Yeah.
You'd hear the audio before you'd see the video.
That's right. Hear the audio.
And I think I told the story once before where I was watching the Cowboys play the Niners in this was the 72 playoffs, I think. And the Cowboys were down by 12 with like 4 minutes to go in the game. And I said to my cousin, let's just go outside and throw the football. This is over. So we went outside, threw the football, came back in about 5 minutes later. So I turned the TV back on, and I'm waiting for the screen to come. But I can hear the audio, and I hear, and now all the Cowboys have to do is sit on the ball, and the game is over. They win. And I'm like, what the? So I missed a great comeback.
Next up is something on Boris Spassky. We talked about Boris and Bobby Fischer last week or 2 weeks ago, and we're not doing it again.
Though he looks really excited in his tennis outfit.
Yeah. He was. There was some other dude he was playing, and
Robert Byrne. Yeah,
they played chess. Someone won, someone lost. That's pretty much how
checkmate.
I think there was checkmates, but then there was a piece done on someone that nobody knew of back at the time, and now everybody does. His name is Bob Arum, and he was promoting a fight between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, the rematch of their fight of the century, and Arum went on to become, if not the most prominent, successful boxing promoter. It's either him or Don King. They did not enjoy each other's company, as it turns out.
I talked to Arum a lot when I was at CBS, but looking at the picture here in the magazine, he's obviously much younger than the image I have, remembering him and stuff like that.
He ended up being Muhammad Ali's guy, and
Financially.
many people think that had Frazier won the rematch, that could have really been detrimental to Arum because he was so invested in Muhammad Ali being successful. But I thought this was interesting. He met Muhammad Ali through Jim Brown. Jim Brown arranged a meeting between Arum and Muslim leaders, and soon after, Ali converted to Islam and joined Main Bout Promotions, which was run by Arum. And basically, Arum, I don't want to say rode Muhammad's coattails, but Muhammad being so successful, well, let's just put it this way. Bob Arum is worth, last I saw, about $320 million. So if he rode his coattails, he rode them rather well.
It's quite a ride.
Yeah. Speaking of fighters, the next one is the Hound and the Hammer. And they're more widely known as the Broad Street Bullies. The Flyers from 74, Bob Hound Kelly and Dave the Hammer Schultz. Billy, you probably know these guys much better than I do.
Yeah, all they did was fight. I mean, they could play. I mean, you weren't in the NHL, but I was just thinking that you look at Dave Schultz and Bob Kelly, they had more than, almost close to 550 penalty minutes in the 1974 season. I mean, you're basically fighting every time you go out there. And I remember seeing Schultz play later on in his career when he was with the Kings, and he was still fighting. And you think of those guys, they were both about 6'1", 6'1". The one guy that beat them both was 5'9", 170 pounds. Don't, that was a different world in the NHL back in the day. And remember, they used to have those brawls, Schultz and them, the whole team.
Right.
Everyone would jump off the bench. It wasn't 1-2 guys squaring off. It'd be the
whole
team squaring off.
And it was basically the coach was encouraging this style of play. They were not a good team.
No.
They were going to shake things up.
Yep.
And they ended up winning the Stanley Cup.
They did because of Bobby Clark. But in that year, they had more than 1,700 penalty minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know in the NHL today if they'd have enough players to put on the ice if they had that many penalty minutes. But back in those days, Hammer, man.
I always thought that the movie Slapshot was based on these guys.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It's based on another minor league team. But it was this era of hockey that I don't think hockey was ever able to find a right balance, because I do think that fighting and that kind of play has a place in hockey. Back then, I mean, it would go into the stands. There would be
Mike
fights
Milbury.
with with fans.
Yeah,
I mean,
Mike Milbury hit the guy with the shoe.
Right.
Yeah.
It kind of got it got out of hand on more than one occasion.
But in those days they didn't wear helmets either, so the guys were taking haymakers to the head.
No, and these guys were, they you said Bobby Clark, right?
Yep.
Well, they had a job to do, and that job was to protect Bobby Clark.
One thing I think about the NHL, and you look at it, what happens when there's a fight? Everybody stands up and they start screaming. You're right about that. They haven't found a happy medium. You don't need everyone on the ice, a bloodbath, but sometimes a good fight, the fans, you go to a game, someone starts throwing down and everyone jumps up and starts screaming. So it's always been sort of a fan favorite. They've sort of eliminated most of it. But back in the day, no, it was a fight time.
So from the Beast to the Beauty. Page 63, and it is the beginning of the swimsuit photos. We won't spend a lot of time on this other than to say that Cheryl Teagues was one of the swimsuit models. You'd be hard-pressed. I mean, if you were going to name a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model, she might be the one that comes to mind more often than anyone else. Christy Brinkley, Cindy Crawford, Kathy Ireland. I don't know how I wrote these down. I didn't know those names just off the top of my head. No, I wouldn't know them. But Cheryl was on the cover 3 times. She was in it
9 times, wasn't it? Yeah,
I think it was 9 times.
Yeah.
And that propelled her career to be a supermodel.
I remember I was watching a little video on some sort of retrospective of her with this SI swimsuit, and she does a shoot, and the lady comes over and goes, your swimsuit's on backwards. She goes, it is? So she did like a part of a shoot with everything backwards. And it was actually very funny. 'Cause
Nice.
when you think of Cheryl Tiegs and that, they never show you
That
behind the
side.
scenes. Yeah.
Right.
But she was laughing and she goes, it is? And they go, yeah, the part around your breasts are supposed to be in front. And then they put it the right way and you go, yes, that's it.
Oh, very good. Very good. I thought this was funny. At the end of the issue, it's called He Woke Up in the Morgue. Did you guys read this?
Oh, yeah.
This is a jockey named Ralph Nevis riding a horse named Fannikins that broke its spine in an accident and landed on top of Nevis. 2 other jockeys came to his aid, finally got the horse off of him. Doctors from the stands at Bay Meadows come out, couldn't find a pulse on Nevis. They announced to the crowd, stand at attention, and they pronounced him dead. And they wrapped him in a white sheet. That was in May of 36. 37 years later, Ralph Nevis is telling the story. So I'm giving, spoiler alert, he wasn't dead. He's watching film of the race, and he realizes that the horse didn't trip. 2 other horses tripped, and Nevis jerked Fannikins so hard to avoid them that it caused Fannikins to fall, and he landed on top of the jockey. So the details to the accident were wrong, but the aftermath is pretty accurate. He was pronounced dead on the track, brought to the hospital where they filled out a death certificate. He awakes in a pitch dark morgue, basically, and starts screaming, but nobody's there to hear him. So he does what anyone would do. He, with hospital gowns on, runs out of the hospital and catches a cab and goes back to the track. And once there, some jockeys brought him to the first aid station. He basically diagnosed with some bruises and a slight case of shock. He wanted to go back to the track because he was the leading jockey, and there was like 2 days left where if he won the most, he would win a bonus. And sure enough, he rides the next day. He gets 2 wins. He gets $500 and a watch. And the San Francisco Chronicle reads, Ralph Nevis died but lives to ride and win. So very good, man. That's a
movie.
Awesome, yeah.
That's a movie.
Right? It
That
really
is
is.
just, that is.
Yeah.
Because when I read that, I thought, oh, this is a joke. No.
Right.
He's in a morgue, man, and gets out and runs back. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like a horror movie.
That's exactly right.
Yes. Yes.
So speaking of movies, there's one other thing I noticed in the magazine is under the people section. And they talk about, so the movie Bang the Drum Slowly had come out.
Yeah.
With Robert De Niro, Michael Moriarty.
You're right.
And Vincent Gardena plays the manager of the team. And
Right.
Vincent Gardena was a character actor. He was in Death Wish. He was in Moonstruck with
He's
Cher.
the kind of guy that you wouldn't know his name, but if guys our age looked up and saw his face, you'd go, I know that guy.
Right. So anyway, he knew nothing about baseball. And the funny thing is, they'd have to tell him, he'd ask, where's third base or whatever. They'd have to
Right.
explain the whole game to him.
Can you imagine? That's like talking to my wife about baseball.
Well, that's why it's called acting.
Got nominated for an Academy Award.
He did?
He did.
Yes, for that. And he
Yes.
had no idea
So he found third base.
he did.
Billy, you got something?
Yeah, I was just reading about it was in a basketball roundup that I didn't know Rick Pitino was in school when Dr. J played.
Yeah.
But he didn't get to play because freshmen weren't allowed to play on the varsity. I didn't know that about Rick Pitino. I thought, and he was also teammates with former Orioles Cy Young winner Mike Flanagan. You don't realize some of these guys are around guys that are just as good in other sports as them.
Right? I'm going to wrap it up unless you guys have something else here with
No.
a couple other baseball players that inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame 50 years ago, 2 of the Yankees' all-time greats. And how great is this that they went in together? I didn't know this. Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford go into the Hall as teammates. They were completely the face of that franchise, the Mick and Whitey. So a good way to close out the January 28th, 1974 issue. Next week, we've got Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier on the cover, so go and take a look at that issue. It's one of the 3 fights that those 2 legends had. The Thrilla in Manila being the 3rd one. So until then, Want to thank Larry Farmer once again. Larry,
Yeah, Larry was
Thank you,
great.
Larry.
Larry, thank you so
and
much.
Mark, good job getting him to join us. Billy, Mark, Jeremy, thanks for everything. See you next week on Past Our Prime.
Bye.
Bye. And I have a new brother.
Yes. Another mother.